When you iron the seams between the blocks, put them down with the snowball block on the top and set that seam. And open it up, bump that seam open. And that should make it lay down really nice. We have all the rows completed now. The next step is to take row 1 and turn it down onto row 2 and sew those together. Then we'll sew row 3 to row 4. Then we'll add 5 to that, and then this section to the rest of it. I like to work on a quilt in sections that are about the same size so you're not dragging a huge quilt around all day long. But we'll get busy. Now when we sew these together, we still have to match these snowball points and the seam line between the blocks. So we want to go from point to point matching as we go across. I have row 1 turned on top of row 2. Going to get the top edges even. It's a little bit harder because we are dealing with larger size sections now. Get the top and the right edge even. Hold your thread and start sewing. Now the first point we want to match is this diagonal. Sew a little bit. Now half of your snowballs will be on top and half will be on bottom this time. There's not really anything we can do about that because you've got different blocks on each side as you go along. And I'm going to peek under here and see if it looks like I'm going to hit the right place. Okay, pass the first one. Get lined up for that second one. Now, as you work along the block, you're not going to pin the whole distance unless you want to pin those particular points. But what I do is go from point to point that I have to match, and that way I don't have to use a lot of pins. If you want to pin this, you can. Now the next point I match is the seams between the two blocks. Try to make sure all of your seams on the bottom continue in the right direction. We don't want to have some of them turn on us. It won't. Nobody will know it once it's quilted, but you'll know it. Most quilters are very conscious of those things. We're going to continue on down. We've gotten through block 1. We're into block 2. And I'll keep going until I get this entire seam done. I have the first seam of the quilt done here. As you can tell, there are several seams that are important. This one right here where the snowball block meets the other block, both of those should be as close as you can get them. This seam right here is where the two blocks on either section meet. That should be a perfect T in there when you get it done. Here's your next snowball, and here's another T right here, and then the last snowball. Work on your seams and try to get them as correct as you can. The nicer the quilt is, the prouder you'll be of it. The center of our quilt is completed. We have all the seams sewn together. I ironed the seams, when I did the rows, I ironed the seams toward the side that had the most snowball blocks on it because that seemed to be less bulk there. And we're ready to measure from side to side and get a measurement. Make sure you measure twice to make sure it's right. And we're going to cut 2 strips of our border material that length and put it the top and the bottom. I've chosen this dark brown for my first narrow inner border, and we'll get that on there now. I have my border strip pinned onto my quilt top now. I have the border strip on the bottom so that I won't have to worry with seams on that side. And I have pinned it on so that I have distributed it evenly all along. And I'm going to sew it on now, and then I will press this seam toward the border strip. And then we'll put the one on the bottom. I have the top and the bottom border on this quilt now. I have just turned it sideways so it's easier to measure. I'm going to measure from the top of the quilt to the bottom of the quilt 2 times and make sure I'm right. And that will be the length I need for the 2 sides for this first border. So we'll get that on now. I have the first border on. It looks really nice. It pulls that brown out really nicely. I'm going to put my second border on. It's this color right here. I'm going to do it the same way. I'm going to measure from side to side and cut a strip for the top and bottom. And then I'll measure from the top and bottom and cut 2 strips, and they'll go on the other side. I may put a third border depending on how it looks. And when I get the borders on, I'll be back. My quilt top has all the borders on it. I decided to go with one more border out there to pull this brown out to the outside. And I will probably bind it in one of these blues with just a thin binding to bring that out. I hope you've enjoyed this and learned from it. Until I see you again, happy quilting.